You know that feeling? Like you're just wired to be a little too sensitive? As if the world's static is always turned up way too loud inside your own head? Well, if any of that sounds familiar, then this guide is absolutely for you. We're about to break down a super practical toolkit, inspired by the work of Daniel Chidiac, all about taking back control from that exhausting, draining cycle of overthinking and emotional chaos.
So let me just ask you straight up. Do you feel everything intensely? I mean, does a small offhand comment from a friend, a tiny change in someone's tone of voice, or even just silence send your mind spiraling? Do you ever feel trapped in these mental loops, just replaying worst-case scenarios over and over and over again? If you're nodding your head right now, please know you are not alone and you are in exactly the right place. We're about to unpack some seriously actionable strategies to help you find your emotional center again. And hey, if you're ready to start that journey with us, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. It's your first step, and it tells us you want more practical guides just like this one. It really helps our community grow.
All right, we're going on a 5-part journey today. First, we're going to dig into why you feel things so deeply. Then, we'll talk about how to escape the thought prison you might be stuck in. After that, we'll get into the tools, how to break the illusion of control, how to stop carrying other people's emotional baggage, and finally, how to defeat that nasty, unhealthy guilt. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning. Why is it that some small, everyday thing can feel like it's completely derailing your entire day? Well, the source material argues it's not random at all. These intense reactions, they're ignited by very specific internal triggers.
So, the heart of the matter is this thing called an emotional trigger. It's not really about the event itself, like a friend not texting you back. It's about the connection that event makes to something much, much deeper inside of you. Think of the event as just the spark. The real explosion, the big emotional reaction, comes from your own past experiences, your hidden fears, or the stories you've been telling yourself for years. So where's that explosion really coming from? The sources point to 3 main roots. First up, you've got hidden fears. And these are the big ones, right? The fear of being judged, that deep terror of abandonment, or just that nagging feeling of not being good enough. Second, we have our mental narratives. You know, those well-worn stories we repeat in our heads, like, see, I knew it, this always happens to me. And third, our past experiences, old patterns and wounds that are, believe it or not, still pulling the strings on how we act today. So how do we start to dismantle this whole thing? Here is an incredibly practical exercise you can do. The very next time you feel that surge of emotion, just pause. First, write down only the objective reality. For example, my boss sent a one-word email. That's a fact, nothing more, nothing less. Second, write down your mind's interpretation of that fact. They're disappointed in my work and think I'm failing. Now that is a story. And third, write down the feeling that story created: shame, anxiety, panic. This simple act creates a conscious separation between fact and the fiction our mind invents. It's like flipping on the lights in a dark room. Suddenly you can see what's really there.
So we've identified the triggers, but what about that endless, looping cycle of overthinking that comes next? This is what the author calls the thought prison, and our next big step is learning how to bust out of it.
This quote right here, this is the key that unlocks the cell door. It's such a crucial realization. Your thoughts are just events happening in your mind. They're like clouds passing in the sky. You aren't the cloud. You're the big, wide-open sky that's watching it go by. That little bit of distance, that separation is freedom.
And that's exactly what the thought prison is. It's that mental state where you feel trapped, constantly analyzing every little thing, building all these negative what-if scenarios, and replaying conversations on a loop. This isn't productive problem solving. It's a hamster wheel of anxiety that leaves you completely and totally drained of energy.
So, how do you break out? You gotta try this. It's a simple but incredibly powerful technique called the thought stop. First, pick a firm, solid word, something like stop or enough. The second you notice your mind starting to spiral down that rabbit hole, mentally yell that word. Then, and this is the most critical part, immediately shift your focus to something outside of your head. Notice a sound in the room. Really look at the details of an object near you. Feel the physical sensation of your own breath moving in and out. This simple act shatters the mental cycle and yanks you right back into the present moment.
Okay, let's get into one of the biggest sources of anxiety for so many of us. That flawed belief that we can, and that we should, be able to control everything. This section is all about shattering that illusion and finding peace by actually letting go.
Just look at these 2 columns for a second. This represents a fundamental, game-changing shift in perspective. On the left, in our control, are our efforts, our actions, our boundaries, and our choices. That's pretty much it. Now look at the right column, the stuff that is out of our control. The final outcome, how other people react, what their opinions of us are, the past, and the future. So much of our stress comes from absolutely exhausting ourselves trying to manage that right-hand column when our true power lies exclusively in the left.
And this need for control, it often leads to what's called decision paralysis, because we're just waiting around for 100% certainty, which, spoiler alert, never ever arrives. This is where the 70% rule becomes a total game changer. The rule is simple. Once you have about 70% of the information you need, you make the call, you decide. You trust that you are capable enough to handle the remaining 30% as it unfolds. It's a powerful shift from chasing impossible certainty to embracing forward momentum.
So here's an exercise to start building this mental muscle. At the end of each day, just identify 3 things that are stressing you out. And for each one, honestly ask yourself, looking back at those 2 columns we just saw, is this really in my control or is it out of my control? And if it's out of your control, consciously say, either out loud or just in your head, this is out of my control and I release it. You do this every day and you literally start to retrain your brain to let go.
All right, let's see how this all builds into our relationships. One of the fastest ways to burn yourself out is to take on the emotional burdens of every single person around you. This section is about learning how to finally put that weight down.
This quote right here really nails a critical distinction. There is a huge difference between helping someone and carrying them. Helping empowers them to find their own strength, but carrying their problems for them, that just enables their helplessness, and in the process, it completely drains you.
Let's get really specific here. Healthy support, that's about listening without feeling like you have to fix everything. It's offering encouragement while still maintaining your own boundaries. Unhealthy caring, on the other hand, that's when you jump in and try to solve all their problems, when you feel responsible for their feelings, and when you start sacrificing your own well-being for theirs. Does anything in that right-hand column sound a little too familiar? Setting boundaries can feel so harsh sometimes, but really it is a radical act of self-preservation. These scripts are your tools for doing it with kindness and with clarity. Notice how they all validate the other person's struggle while firmly protecting your own energy. That third one, by the way, that sounds difficult. What do you think you'll do? That one is especially powerful. It shows you care, but it gently hands the responsibility for taking action right back to its rightful owner.
And that leads us perfectly into our final section, dealing with the paralyzing emotion of guilt. Unhealthy guilt is often the very chain that keeps us carrying weight that isn't even ours to carry in the first place.
Okay, first things first. We have to understand that not all guilt is bad. There is a vital difference. Healthy guilt says, I did something wrong. It's specific to an action, and it motivates you to repair that mistake. Unhealthy guilt, though, is toxic. It says, I am bad. It's an attack on your core identity, and it's driven by a fear of how others will react. All it does is motivate you to become a people pleaser. So, when you feel that wave of unhealthy guilt wash over you, don't fight it. Instead, try this mindfulness exercise. First, just name it without any judgment. Okay, I am experiencing a wave of guilt. This creates distance. Second, locate it physically. Is it a tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach? Grounding the emotion in your body keeps it from just spiraling in your mind. And finally, take one small, simple physical action. Drink a glass of water, stretch for 5 seconds. This breaks the mental loop and pulls you back to reality where that guilt has so much less power over you. Wow, we have covered a huge amount of ground today. So let's just boil it all down into 3 powerful truths to take with you. First, your feelings are always valid, but the stories your mind tells you about those feelings are not always fact. Learn to question them. Second, you can't control that first automatic thought that pops into your head, but you always have the power to choose the second one. And that right there, that's where your freedom lies. And finally, the ultimate aha moment. True peace is found not in gaining more control over your world, but in bravely releasing your need for it. And all of that leaves us with just one final question for you. After everything we've explored today, what is the very first weight, a thought, a worry, a need for control? What is the first thing that you will consciously choose to set down, starting right now? Thanks so much for joining us.